Okay, my name is Lucas, and this is my presentation on ethically representing trauma through the lens of Room, um, directed by Lenny Abrahamson. So, the film that I'm going to be analyzing, as I mentioned, is Room, um, which follows a woman and her son, um, and how they choose to live life every day, being held captive in a single room by a abusive uh, criminal. And it's based on a true story of a woman named Elizabeth Fritzl and how she was held captive by her own father for 24 years. So the filmmakers have two ethical responsibilities. One, it's to um, the main one is to ethically show trauma and how people move on, and also they want to not undermine the severity of the real events of Elizabeth Fritzl. Um, So there's a couple things that filmmakers have to think about when tackling this film. Some stylistic choices. There's a lot of wide or high angle shots that show the space of their living situation and how it's really confined, as you can see in this picture, and these pictures. Um, they're only actually held captive for the first act of the film. The second and the third act are much more about how they move on from the past and how they better themselves and how they put their trauma to the side. Um, and it sort of is a not a slow burn, but necessarily, but it starts off really brutal, showing some really graphic scenes. And as we get closer and closer to the end, there starts to be some light at the end of the tunnel to show how these characters move on past the trauma. The ethical stakes, as I mentioned earlier, there's sensitive topics such as rape, trauma, sexual assault, and kidnapping. Um, and having to show these things through the eyes of a child character adds another layer of ethical responsibility as well. Um, they have to really make sure that they're not exploiting or undermining the severity of the trauma. Um, and they do this by actually showing their transformation and how going through something traumatic, like how they go through, the pain isn't going to just go away the second that they're saved. And that I think the film does a really good job at showing that um, moving on is a process. It's not just something that happens immediately. As I say right here, they avoid the on the nose explanations of character emotions and they steer away from just straight up exposition dumping. And that really helps too by making it feel more authentic, I guess, in a way. Some challenges. The film focuses heavily on psychological impacts that these traumatic experiences have on the characters. Again, but they do it by avoiding the on the nose explanation and instead actually show their progressive acceptance of the past. The sexual violence is never actually shown on screen, but it's implied through specific camera angles and the actors and it's shown. It's not actually shown like in the frame, but you know what's happening. Um, and I think this was intentional because they don't want to. That would be exploitative. I think if they showed the actual violence. Um, the filmmakers themselves actually said that they couldn't care less about who the rapist is, so they avoid his backstory entirely and just kind of use him as a plot point. There's no exposition for who he is or like their relationship to him. He's just kind of a really bad guy, and that's all we really know about him. Which is another way that the filmmakers choose to ethically make this film, because too much depth into who the rapist is might come off as, um, I don't know, like you have to see all sides kind of thing, even though he's a terrible person, right? Um, and I also say again that the film shows trauma doesn't just simply disappear upon rescue, but it actually shows the slow process of recovery. how does this film relate to my ethical compass? This film taught me a lot about ethically representing trauma and sexual assault. Uh, these are themes that I could potentially see myself working with in the future. So having films like Room to show me how to represent trauma and sexual assault is really important, I think, to all filmmakers. Um, so yeah. In conclusion, upon release, Room was seen by audiences as a very emotional and uplifting film, despite its sensitive subject matter and content. Brie Larson actually won an Oscar for her performance as the mother. And the film also got nominated for a few other Oscars, including Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Adapted Screenplay. Um, this film is seen as very ethically responsible, but with time, I think that this film can be seen as even more ethically responsible in the future, just because of how carefully it handles these sensitive topics. So yeah, this is my works cited. Thank you very much for listening.